look outside to material nature, but he looks into the spiritual nature of his existence. With a sober mind, he simply engages in the service of the Lord. Thus, he realizes his own self without false identification with matter and without affection for material possession. Such a great devotee is never in trouble with others because he sees everyone from the platform of spiritual understanding. He sees himself and others in the right perspective. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay, so this is a very instructive verse and purport. So the verse says, thus he, talking about Kardama Muni, gradually became unaffected by the false ego of material identity and became free from material affection. So the false ego of material identity, this is like, 99.9% of the people in the world are identifying themselves with the false ego. Uh, and they have what's called material affection. No affection for the Lord, but material affection. So, uh, and because they have this material affection, because they're not really connected to Krishna, uh, they're disturbed. They have problems, mental problems, money problems, people problems, and all kinds of different materialistic problems. So, to become someone who's undisturbed, equal to everyone, and without duality is very rare. People have prejudices. They, some people uh, have severe prejudices. In other words, they're against certain groups of people, or they have uh, animosity towards certain types of people based on the body. So they don't actually see the soul of the person. They just see something that is external to a person, and they identify a person by their bodily, let's say, bodily identification, and they develop uh, hatred, or they develop jealousy, or they develop all kinds of negative opinions about people. And because of that, uh, there is strife. There is a lot of, let's say, uh, material uh, uh, consciousness, and there is, hatred. There's jealousy. There's all kinds of false ideas about people and who is a good person, who is a bad person, and uh, and because of that type of false identification, they also suffer because they have these prejudices. Uh, and it says here that a person engaged in Krishna consciousness is at once liberated from the influence of the three modes of material nature. In other words, once the conditioned soul engages himself in devotional service, he also becomes liberated like the Lord. So by devotional service, one is becomes on the same level as the Lord. That is, they are spiritually situated they're no longer materially situated. And this is because they agreed to be engaged in devotional service. And by being engaged in devotional service, they become liberated like the Lord, liberated from what? Lust, anger, and greed. Uh, if there is no relationship with Krishna, ultimately people become influenced by lust, anger, and greed. Most people have this uh, ignorance, and because of ignorance, they cannot see past the body. They don't understand that the real person is the soul. They simply look at the body, and by that bodily, uh, let's say, consciousness, they develop all kinds of prejudices and misconceptions about people and about themselves also, which means that they're influenced by the three modes material nature. Those are goodness, passion, and ignorance. This ignorance is profound. Due to ignorance, people also do things that are detrimental to themselves. They're self inflicted, uh, and because of that, they suffer unnecessarily, and they develop all kinds of false ideas, false religions, false purposes in life. And what happens eventually? There's violence, there's fear, there's anger. All these things develop due to lack of Krishna consciousness. But a person engaged in Krishna consciousness is at once liberated from the influence of the three modes of material nature. In other words, once the conditioned soul engages himself in devotional service, he also becomes liberated like the Lord. So by devotional service, one comes to what would be called the level of the Lord. The Lord is not influenced by the modes and material natures. The Lord doesn't have any bad, let's say, thoughts or activities. So it's possible to come to the same level as the Lord. That doesn't mean you uh, become the Lord, but you can come to the same level of Krishna consciousness as the Lord. How do you do that? Well, uh, we have to get rid of what's called the anarthas. The anarthas, or bad habits, meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, intoxication. These are the sinful activities that keep people in this, you could call it well, a dark well of ignorance. And in that dark well of ignorance, they also act contrary to their own benefit. They stop themselves from engaging in devotional service. That means they're acting against their own benefits. And that's a very sad situation. We see that especially in the lives of people who are addicted to drugs. They become addicted to drugs, and basically it ruins their health. Their mentality becomes completely materialistic and dark. They develop these dark uh, ideas about life, and they suffer unnecessarily. And you see this. Uh, so, without Krishna consciousness, one will eventually become a very sad and paranoid person. They they develop this type of paranoia where they're afraid of things that don't actually exist, but they think these things exist. And they're not able to live a peaceful, happy life. They're always in anxiety. Anxiety is caused by not being sure about what's going to happen in the future. So a devotee knows what's going to happen in the future. They're going to go back to Godhead. And because they're strictly following the regulative principles. But a materialist doesn't know what's going to happen in the future, and that causes a lot of anxiety. From one minute to the next, they're not sure, and not being sure, they become anxious, and then they do different things that are uh, antisocial behavior. Uh, they don't trust anyone. They imagine things that are not true. They uh, try to sequester themselves. There's this one very rich American. Uh, he got so, uh, let's say, spooked uh, by the phantoms of illusion that he eventually, and he was a very rich man, very, very rich man, but he became uh, illusioned. And he put himself in a type of closed uh, bunker. And there was his only, let's say, connection with the outside world was a very, he was in a highly protected room. And there was no way to communicate except by some, uh, well, you could call it some hole that was also protected, and people would uh, put food through that hole, and he would eat, and eventually he blocked the hole also, and then he died. So he was a very, very rich man, but he developed this paranoia, and because of that, he eventually became, well, you could say he became crazy, and he died of starvation. So there are people like that. They're very egocentric. They're very paranoid, and they have hallucinatory dreams, or they even when they're awake, they have hallucinations, and it's a very let's say uh, what you would call troubled psychological life that they imagine so many things that are not actually true.
It's Howard Hughes.
Howard Hughes was one of them, yes. He ended up completely paranoia and locked himself up, you know. And there was only one way you could communicate with him, and then eventually he always also locked that uh, possibility of connecting with the outside world, and he died. You want to read about him a little bit? You have some information there.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Howard Hughes, an American business magnate, inventor, film director, and aviator. He was a pioneering figure in aviation, making significant contributions to the design and development of airplanes, including setting multiple airspeed records. Hughes founded the Hughes Aircraft Company and was involved in producing innovative aircraft. Despite his success, Hughes became increasingly reclusive and eccentric in his later years. He developed severe obsessive compulsive disorder, and his health deteriorated as he became addicted to painkillers and suffered from hallucinations. He spent the last years of his life in isolation, often locked away in darkened hotel rooms. Hughes passed away in 1976, underweight and suffering from malnutrition and neglect due to his mental and physical health.
There you are. Yeah, he was one example of what we're talking about. And why? Because he had no relationship with Krishna. You see, people that don't have any relationship with Krishna, they develop oftentimes this paranoia, this fear of people, and especially germs. Hughes was very paranoid about germs. And therefore, he basically sequestered himself, and it was very difficult to communicate with him. He didn't trust anyone, and he was very paranoid about germs. And so he was living although he's an extremely rich person, uh, he was an aviation guy. He had airplanes and so forth. But he eventually locked himself up basically to be free from germs. Well, there are germs everywhere. You're not going to be able to be free from germs. But he had this foible. Look that word up, foible. He imagined things, and eventually he died of starvation, I think. So these are things that happen when you don't have any relationship with Krishna. You begin to imagine things that don't really exist, and you develop fear and trepidation. Any little thing makes you upset, and you try to avoid the communication with other people. And in case of Howard Hughes, he had this uh, fear of germs. And how do you get germs? It's through association with people. So he became like a hermit and living in a very secluded room. He didn't exactly run away from society, but he sequestered himself or lived like uh, you know, and lived like a person who was afraid of other people. So, what does it say about him?
The foibles are minor weaknesses or eccentricities in a person's character or behavior.
Eccentricity means he's like crazy.
Mm.
Mhm.
They're typically small flaws or idiosyncrasies that don't cause serious harm but make someone unique or imperfect in some way. So, foibles are often seen as quirks that, while sometimes annoying, are generally harmless. The term is often used in a light-hearted and forgiving manner, recognizing that everyone has their own minor imperfections. So foibles is used in that context.
Yeah, when Howard Hughes was crazy.
Yeah, he had this
He's way past
obsessive compulsive disorder.
yeah.
He's got a mental disorder because he's
Now, why is that? See, when you have someone like Prahlad Maharaj, right? He's only a 5-year-old boy, but his father decides to kill him. And Prahlad, why? Because Prahlad is a devotee. He became a devotee already in the womb of his mother because at one point his mother was captured by the enemies of the father, who was Hiranyakashipu. And because the wife was pregnant, they uh, the demigods thought that, okay, uh, she's pregnant, so the baby in her womb will be a horrible demon, just like the father. But Narada Muni stopped the demigods from uh, taking, considering that the mother was going to give birth to someone like Hiranyakashipu, and they were going to kill her in order to kill the baby. And then Narada Muni took possession of her and saved her life and took her to his ashram and protected her. And eventually, uh, her child was born. He was a pure devotee. And uh, you see how people can make the mistakes. Like the demigod, they made a mistake. They couldn't understand that Prahlad Maharaj was in the womb of the mother, and they were going to kill her. So these are types of hallucinatory, let's say, uh, hallucinatory uh, concepts that people develop uh, because of lack of knowledge and because of a type of paranoia, fear of things that actually are not real. And they get into a type uh, of fear and anxiety. They also call it, they get these anxiety, uh, in, let's say, paranoia, and they imagine things that are not actually true. And they develop a very dark consciousness, very negative consciousness, and it becomes difficult for them to live in normal society. And oftentimes they become they're considered to be crazy and they're put into asylums where they're basically in a prison, not because they're um, you know not because they are criminals, but because they are imagining things that are not true, and they can commit suicide or also commit violence on others because they're imagining things. You know, sometimes someone kills another person and they're arrested, and when uh, they go to court and they say, well, God told me to kill this person. so, so they try and use that as an excuse of why uh, they should not be held responsible for what they did. You know, but this is of course uh, either they're crazy or they're lying. Either way, both ways, they're trying to find an excuse why they shouldn't be prosecuted for killing someone. Now, sometimes, I mean, oftentimes, the idea that, oh, I was crazy or I lost control of myself temporarily, but I'm okay now, right?
Mm.
Uh, that never really works. I mean, oftentimes they try and use that as an excuse so that they will not be prosecuted or put into jail, but it doesn't usually work, you know. In very, very rare occasions, that type of plea may be accepted, but they'll bring in psychiatrists and and then one psychiatrist will say, well, he's lying, but another psychiatrist says, no, no, he was actually hallucinating. And then there'll be the war, not the war, but there'll be different psychiatrists will come in and speak about the person. Someone might say that he was temporarily insane, so it's called the insanity plea. Look that up, insanity plea.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can prove that you are temporarily insane, sometimes in very, very rare, let's say, uh, very, very rare instances, you might be exonerated for committing a severe crime.
Insanity plea, also known as the insanity defense, is a legal defense used in criminal cases where a defendant claims that they're not responsible for their actions due to mental illness at the time of the crime.
At the time of
The crime.
crime, yes.
The argument is that the defendant was unable to understand the nature of their actions or distinguish right from wrong due to a severe mental disorder. Key aspects of insanity plea: lack of criminal responsibility. The defendant admits to committing the act, but asserts that they should not be held legally responsible because their mental illness prevented them from having the intent required to commit the crime.
You'd be surprised how many, uh, you know, how many um, criminals try to use the insanity plea to be exonerated from punishment. You'd be surprised. When everything else fails, they make the insanity plea. But the very rare, very, very rare instances where that can exonerate them from being punished for crimes. It has been, sometimes it has been accepted in a court of law, but you'd have to get all these psychologists to come in and say, well, he was temporarily insane. So he didn't know what he was doing.
They have some legal standards for insanity plea.
Okay.
One is the Manhattan rule.
What?
There is a rule by, I think maybe a psychologist by name McNaughton.
Oh, okay.
It's called a cognitive test. This is one of the most common legal standards for the insanity defense. It states that a person is not guilty by reason of insanity if, at the time of crime, they were suffering from such a defect of reason due to mental illness that they did not understand the nature of their act or did not know it was wrong. So there's some
Yeah,
tests.
oftentimes, I mean, there's different ways they claim that they were temporarily insane, but many times they say, well, God told me to do it. You know, they use the God told me to do it plea. Or I heard these voices and they said that I should immediately kill my mother. Or my son is actually a demon, and I had to kill him to save society from his demoniac, consciousness. So there are all kinds of crazy things that people say in the insanity plea to be exonerated. So instead of going to jail, they put you in a mental hospital. But that doesn't work. Most of the time, it doesn't work. Did you say anything else?
Yeah, there are a few other types of legal standards. Another one is irresistible impulse test. This standard considers whether the defendant, while knowing the act was wrong, was unable to control their behavior due to mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is Durham rule.
What?
There is another rule called product test or Durham rule. Under the standard, the defendant is not criminally responsible if their unlawful act was the product of mental illness or defect. Basically, this is like this rule is less commonly used due to its broad nature. Basically, if the source it's not a direct correlation, but it's an indirect correlation. And then there is a model penal code.
Moral penal code.
Yes, it's a combination of earlier rules and the irresistible impulsive test. This test states that a person is not responsible if, due to mental illness or defect, they lack substantial capacity either to appreciate the criminality of their conduct or to conform their conduct to the law. Burden of proof. In most jurisdictions, the burden is on the defense to prove the defendant's insanity. Often, though, expert testimony from psychologists and or psychiatrists. Some
Psychiatrists.
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 Psychiatrists. Is it psychiatrists?
Yeah.
Yeah. Some states require the prosecution to prove that the defendant was sane beyond a reasonable doubt.
Insane.
No, most of the cases it's the defense that has to prove. But
Yeah.
apparently some states require if the other side, that is the prosecution, to prove that the person was sane.
Oh yeah. Okay. Sorry.
It is the opposite.
Yeah, it's the insanity plea. In very rare instances does it work, in the court of law. And most of the time, they prove that the person was actually committed the crime in full consciousness. But if you claim that, oh well, I was temporarily insane, I didn't know what I was doing. It's not my fault. That's really hard to convince a judge or a jury. So they bring in different types of psychologists. One psychologist say, "Well, he was definitely insane, and momentarily insane. You didn't know what he was doing." Another psychologist comes in and said, "No, no, he's lying. He knew exactly what." So it's a war of the psychologists. Uh, that's why psychology is a very imperfect uh, type of proof. Because psychologists can be prejudiced also. Like, for example, when they uh, try and find people to on jury duty, you get a letter in the mail saying that you have to come and be part of a jury, and you're more or less not absolutely forced. You can give a reason why you can't come and spend maybe 6 weeks or so many months in jury duty, because oftentimes there are jury, uh, let's say, jury duty means that you hear the pros and cons of a person's behavior, and you have to decide whether this person should go to jail or not go to jail. And they pay you a little bit of money, but you could, be in jury duty for like weeks or months, depending on, how long it takes to find how long it takes to prosecute a person. Sometimes a jury duty can go on for months. Why don't you look that up? Jury duty. So you get a letter from the state, and they say, we want you to come for jury duty. So you have to give a reason why you don't want to do it, and you can say, well, I'm sick, or well, it would cause a big problem in my life because I'm the only person that earns money to maintain my family. They'll try and find some cause why they can't go on jury duty.
So jury duty is a civic responsibility in which citizens are called to serve as jurors in a legal proceeding. typically in a criminal or civil trial. Jurors are tasked with hearing evidence, assessing facts, and rendering a verdict based on the law and instructions provided by the judge. Key aspects. Number one, selection process. Summons. Citizens are randomly selected from voter registrations or driver license records and are sent a jury duty summons requiring them to appear in court. Voir dire. Voir dire. Potential jurors are questioned by attorneys and judge to determine if they can be impartial and fair. If chosen, they are sworn in to serve on the jury.
Oftentimes, butchers are never accepted for jury duty. Yeah, so these are people, that they're killing animals because they always say, "Oh, he's guilty." So and sometimes it's very difficult to get people to go on jury duty. Like myself, I would try and find the reason why I can't do jury duty. I don't think I've ever been asked to be on a jury, but it can take months. It depends on, sometimes it could be very quick, type of a prosecution, or sometimes it could take, months, and your life is like completely based on going to court, on a regular basis and hearing, the arguments of the two lawyers, whether this person is guilty or not. Sometimes there are the prosecutions take a long time, and it can disrupt your whole life. So they usually try and get people who are. I'm not going to say every time, but many times they get people who are not working, or are older and retired, uh, because they have the time to sit down and hear both sides of a lawyers. The one that's trying to uh, protect the accused person, and the other one is trying to uh, prosecute the person. So, have you ever been called for jury duty?
No, I don't think.
Yeah, you're lucky.
I was called, but because I am on visa, so I cannot try.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you're lucky. That's when you're lucky to not have a a green card. Yeah, you got to have a good reason why you can't go on jury duty. Yeah.
Exemptions from jury duty. Certain individuals may be excused from the jury duty if they have a valid reason, such as a personal hardship, illness, a conflict of interest. Professionals like doctors, law enforcement, or individuals with caregiving responsibilities may be exempt. Doctors, law enforcement, and caregivers. In some jurisdictions, individuals over certain age or with certain occupations can request an exemption. Jury duty responsibilities, impartiality. Jurors must remain unbiased and avoid discussing the case with others, and refrain from seeking outside information on the case. Confidentiality. Deliberations are confidential, and jurors must respect the privacy of the discussions in the jury room. Attendance. Once selected, attendance is mandatory unless excused by the court. Compensation. Jurors typically receive modest compensation for their time, along with the reimbursement for the travel expenses. However, many employers are required to give employees time off for the jury duty without penalizing. So apparently they still get paid. supposed to be paid. Importance of jury duty. Jury duty plays a crucial role in ensuring that citizens participate in the justice system. The right to a trial by jury is fundamental to democracy as it ensures that the defendant's fate is determined by a group of peers rather than the government officials alone. And then there are two types of juries. There's the petite jury and there's grand jury. Petite or
It means it's small.
or a trial jury hears evidence in a trial and renders the verdict of guilty or not guilty in criminal cases or finds the plaintiff or defendant in civil cases. In case of grand jury, they determine whether there is enough evidence for a case to go to trial. It does not decide guilt or innocence, but issues indictments.
Issues what?
Indictments.
Yes.
Basically, that's what like in case of
Indictment means you're not you're not guilty, but you have to come to the court and they decide whether you're guilty or not. So when you're indicted, they say you're there's circumstantial evidence that you committed a crime, but you're still not considered a criminal until the jury decides.
An indictment is a formal accusation that a person has committed a serious crime. It's still an accusation. It is typically issued by grand jury after reviewing evidence presented by a prosecutor. The indictment formally charges the individual with a criminal offense and initiates the process of going to a trial.
All right. Sometimes, jury duty, sometimes it can take months. So it can disrupt your life like anything, especially for people who are not like retired. You can be on jury duty for months. And sometimes, it's dangerous for someone to be on jury duty, so the criminals can, they're big time criminals can get someone to, shoot you or, scare you by saying, well, your daughter goes to school and she could have an accident, and so, of course, that's illegal to intimidate people on jury duty, but sometimes people get so scared that they want to get off the jury, or they will, in cases where a person can be, uh, convicted and to be uh, uh, to die. I'm not sure, but I think the jury has to be unanimous in order to convict someone to be killed. So all the criminals have to do is scare one of the persons on the jury to not agree that the criminal is should be put to death. Why don't you look that up? In order to in cases where a person can be judged uh,
It's a touch-based.
yeah, and then they can be prosecuted to die. I think that the jury has to be absolutely unanimous. And there can be sometimes, 12 people on jury duty, and all 12 will have to be convinced that the person should have either a long uh, time in jail or that they should be put to death.
Yeah, so
I think you have to be, in order to put someone to death, the jury has to be unanimous. And if there's one person that doesn't agree that they should be put to death, then you have what's called a hung, Hung, jury. And anyway, go ahead. What does it say?
a jury must be unanimous in the following situations, depending on the type of the case and the legal jurisdictions. First is criminal cases, felony trials, like serious crimes. In most jurisdictions in United States, a jury must reach a unanimous verdict
You see,
in criminal
unanimous
cases.
means everybody in the jury agrees that the criminal should be put in jail for rest of their life, or should be uh, subject to being killed.
Yeah, cases like murder, robbery, and other felonies. This means that all jurors must agree on whether the evident defendant is guilty or not guilty. There are few cases, even the misdemeanor cases, less serious cases, states may allow um, non-unanimous verdicts, but this is less common. The requirement for unanimity in criminal cases is meant to ensure that a person's guilt is decided beyond a reasonable doubt by all members of the jury. Hung jury in criminal trials. If a jury cannot reach a unanimous verdict after extended deliberation, it is called a hung jury or deadlock jury. In this case, the judge may declare a mistrial and prosecutor can decide whether to retry the case with a new jury. A hung jury does not mean the defendant is acquitted or convicted. It simply means the
Yes,
jury.
so these people are big criminals. They're they'll have someone that works for them um, scare a person who's on the jury. All you have to do is scare one person, right? And then that person will say, "Well, I don't think he's guilty," and you have a hung jury, and they can't put the person in jail. But uh, if the police know that one person was intimidated by some criminals, then um, it becomes a criminal case. I mean, you cannot intimidate a juror, someone that's on the jury. If you intimidate someone and the government finds out about it, you can be arrested and put in jail. It's a very serious thing to intimidate a juror, but it happens. There's all kinds of things that can happen. Like, the criminal is going to say, "Well, we'll give you $10,000, to say he's not guilty." And if the juror does that, then they commit a crime. They're put in jail. Or uh, maybe they don't give any money, but they scare someone. They say, "Well, your kid is going to school every day on this bus," and then the juror becomes frightened like anything, and you know, they do what the criminals tell them to do. It's a very, very difficult situation. The type of jury duty. It's a duty to be on. If your government asks you to come on jury service, you have to have a really good reason why you can't. So if you say, "Well, I'm the only one that's earning money for the family. If I go on jury duty for a month or two, my family will suffer." So usually they'll say, "Okay." But if you don't have a good reason, then they can force you come on jury duty. But normally, if you give them a good reason, they'll say, "Okay, you're exonerated." Yeah.
Looks like Sankarshan Prabhu was once, there's a comment. He was once asked for jury duty, but he was traveling or planning to travel out of the country. So he showed the ticket and he was never contacted again.
Yeah, he's lucky. You have to have a good reason, and then exonerate.
One of my friend, he got called, but during the selection process, he didn't get selected. So it was fun.
Yeah, because both sides,
Have to
both
agree.
will be able to interrogate the person who's being considered for jury duty, and so one side or the other can decide, no, we don't want this person. No. For example, if you're a butcher, usually they don't let butchers on the jury team because the butchers will always say, "Oh, he's guilty. He's to be killed," because all day long that's all they do is kill animals, right? So, and they're prejudiced. Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, sometimes there's very high profile criminals. They're being, you know, uh, they have to decide whether he goes to jail or not, or whether he's put to death. And the criminal has so many people on the outside that work for him. So you can get a little a note here on your uh, 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 that they slip a note underneath the door of your house. And it says you better not do this or that, otherwise we're going to kill you. And the juror becomes scared like anything. Of course, the juror can complain to the police, and then the police try and find who tried to intimidate you. So all these things can happen. Sometimes they sequester the juror. That means that they put them in a safe, uh, house where they don't go home. And during the trial, nobody can have, no one can call them, the jurors, no one they don't communicate with outside people, and they protect them like that, so that no criminal can scare them. It's complicated because there's sometimes a very high profile, uh, you know, cases, and it's dangerous sometimes to be a juror. You could be killed. Yeah. But of course, it's a big offense to intimidate a juror or threaten a juror, because you can be put in jail for that. Hmm. Just imagine you're on a jury duty, right? And somebody, an anonymous person, uh, you know, calls you and says, "Well, we know where your children go to school, so you better not, do this or do that." You get scared. You know, but basically they're saying in a roundabout way, they're going to kill your child if you, uh, vote to put their boss in jail. It happens. It happens a lot. Or they give money to a juror to not to not vote to put someone in jail. But all these things are illegal. So in the end, if a juror accepts money to vote this way or that way, the juror can be put in jail because it's a crime, you know. So you see, you know, every day in the United States there are criminal cases, and there, you know, and sometimes people on jury the obligation, and so many things happen. You know, they're very strange and dangerous. Sometimes jurors are killed. You know, not all the time, but if the police think that they can be killed, they will put you in a safe house until the whole uh, you know, prosecution is finished. Yeah. But you know, it can be very disruptive for a person. Usually they try and get people who are retired, you know, so um, Honeyball. So you were called on jury.
once,
Yeah.
but I cannot go because of the visas.
Yeah. I
Hare
was
Krishna
called.
Maharaj.
Yes.
Hare Krishna
Yes.
Maharaj. So I
Yes.
have been called after my delivery of my daughter, 3 months after. And then even though I gave them all these reasons, but they didn't listen to me. And then I was called when I was selected up to the jury, where I had to go into the courthouse where I could see the person who is and of interest and defendant basically, and their side of lawyers and prosecution side. And then I gave all the that time I had a postpartum preeclampsia related blood pressure. I told them that this is what is happening. They didn't listen to me anything. And then the case was about this guy who is like, he's not an English speaking person. He's from somewhere outside. So he had ran through the traffic light, and then the police tried to stop him and he didn't. And something of that sort had happened. So they inquired if anybody has any issues with the police before, where you think the police didn't judge you properly. And then that's when I said yes, I had an issue where the police had stopped me near the Safeway because I was in a gray BMW, but a similar gray BMW had some boys who had stole something from Safeway market. So they had stopped me, and then they took like 10 minutes of me at night. And so I said, like, when they don't understand some language, they really blame that person. So I'm sure this guy didn't do any problem, but like they are blaming him. Something I said very drastically. So that's when they said, like, okay, we will let you go. I mean, like, they didn't consider, like, I was given jury number 2. To more than 12 people were selected for that. And then slowly, they were like cutting down who they will keep. And finally, I was let go. And I was like, I gave them all sort of reasons, but they didn't listen to me. And I kept getting just jury duty. Out of so many people, I always get jury duty. I'm not that lucky.
Wow. They really want you on jury duty.
And my husband also got I mean, like he also was given that summon, and then he went 2 times, and then he was also selected as the shortlist, and he was also shortlisted. He had to go for 2 days, and finally they found their set of jury and they let him go. But like for whole 2 days, he has to be there in the court. He wasn't going anywhere, and then he took
Right.
leave from office also.
Wow.
Yeah, so like it's very complicated that way. I always feel like why do I get jury duty so much, and then
Well, they know
um,
you're a good person. You're an honest person. That's why they want you to be on jury duty.
yeah, just wanted to share my experience, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, jury duty is very stressful sometimes because, especially if it's a trial to determine whether a person should go to jail or should be hanged or whatever, then it becomes very, very dramatic. And you know, in order for the state to convince the jury that a person should be killed. Oh, there has to be no doubt in the mind of of all the jurors. There has to be a unanimous decision to convict someone to be killed, right? And sometimes, even if one of the jurors says, "No, I don't think he's guilty," then it's called a hung jury. Then that person will go free. So it's very, very stressful for the jurors. Some people like it. Some people like to be on a jury and to convict someone. So you have to be, have an open mind. You can't be reading newspapers. They're talking about the criminal. If they find out that you've been reading newspapers, so sometimes they'll sequester the jury. In other words, you have to live in a hotel for a certain period of time, so you're not allowed to read any newspapers or hear the news, so that you don't develop prejudice. So it's a complicated thing for the state to have a non-biased jury. So they will also interrogate you to see, what kind of a person you are, and you just say, well, I know who you're talking about. He's definitely guilty. If you say something like that, no one accept you in the jury. Yeah, I've been reading about this criminal. I really think he's guilty. If you say something like that, that's it. You're not on the jury. Yeah. Haribol. Oh, Gracious Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sometimes they have situations where the judge makes the decision. The judge will decide whether someone is guilty or not. Sometimes when there's a jury prosecution of someone and the judge does not like what their decision is, he can override the jury's decision and say, no, he's guilty. A lot of different situations. If the judge thinks that the jury has been corrupted, he can ignore their decision and make a decision himself. And then sometimes that means it's going to be another trial, because the lawyers of the criminal say that the judge is acted wrongly or whatever. So anyway, in order to have due process, and that's a legal term, due process, meaning a person is not, there's no prejudice in convicting a person. They receive due process. Sometimes you can find a reason why they don't have due process, and then you have to have another trial. If they think that there was some prejudice, someone was prejudiced on the jury. Okay, well, thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. I hope you never go on jury trial. Jury duty.